This premiere episode is about the most exciting gender reveal party in politics. We have a VP candidate. May the Maya Rudolph Renaissance begin. Welcome, fellow lizard people, to the liberal conspiracy. Now, this is the internet, and sometimes people of all types don't understand jokes or context, and it makes me a little nervous. For example, I just edited myself to say this. Type people make me nervous. To be clear, this is Joke Show, talking about real news and hot goss, not that hot goss. And for the record, I'm a big fan of the people from
Thailand.
I'm Josh Burstein, a campaign hack, and this is a show where I say absurd things with a straight face and harsh truths about the end of democracy with positivity. Today, we'll break down the significance of VP Kamala Harris with activists and historians, and you'll meet the worst person on the internet. It's really worth hanging around for. Trust me, this guy is awful. It's amazing. Our main focus, the vice presidency, a position historically not all that consequential. They have name ID and not much else, the backup catcher of the executive branch. They do get to swing both ways. The only position in the executive and legislative branch. That means they get to play tiebreaker in the Senate if they vote 50-50. But mostly they do the garbage photo ops and risky policy rollouts that POTUS doesn't have time for. Obama and Biden's special relationship was one of collaboration and mutual respect. That is not requisite. The romantic graphic novel for Jimmy Carter and Walter Mondale did not sell as well. The VP pick brings in a lot of fanfare, but really doesn't amount to much of a bump in the election, outside of a few points in their home state. It certainly made my life hell for a day when Paul Ryan was selected in 2012, and I had to spend all night in Green Bay trying to craft the perfect negative ad with the right dash of Midwest nice.
Wisconsin knows Paul Ryan as someone to really be careful with.
They sure do. Maybe this pick is different. Kamala Harris, beyond generating must-see TV with Mike Pence this October, offers our first black AAPI female president ready to lead on day one. It's like I've been looking for this clip where a guy rips the e-brake on a Corvette as it races off a cliff, and it stops just as the back wheels teeter off the edge. Then he steps out all cool and throws on some aviators, and this dope, ethnically diverse prosecutor that loves to cook steps in the driver's seat and pulls away. Yeah, I've been looking for that clip. I couldn't find it, but you get it. Get on that, Shutterstock. Just give me some quiet, normal days. I don't even want to know we have a Washington, D.C. some days. I want Twitter to be cat videos again, and not like this cat video. Sweet Christmas, this guy might even ruin cat videos for humanity. Quick history lesson. Our first few presidents, the VP was originally a consolation prize, with a guy like Aaron Burr backing up Thomas Jefferson, America's original hipster. You may have gotten to know Burr as the progressive hero in the musical Hamilton. He's the one who cared about immigration rights. Hamilton delivered slaves to his dad-in-law in New York. Burr championed criminal justice reform, women's rights. Lin-Manuel is a national treasure, but Alexander Hamilton is the Steve Mnuchin of colonial America. Am I canceled? There's a lot of vice presidents who have done some weird things. Here's some of the hits from our correspondent Esteban Gast in a segment called Yes, That's Real.
Before we begin the segment, let me acknowledge two things. Yes, my name is Esteban. Sometimes when I tell people my name, they're like, oh, are we using high school Spanish class name? Call me Shakira. Number two thing we have to acknowledge is the mustache. I don't like it either. I'm also uncomfortable. The first vice president we're looking at is Thomas Marshall. He's Woodrow Wilson's vice president, and he famously hated the job. He one time told a bodyguard that his job was useless because, quote, nobody ever shoots a vice president. The next vice president we're looking at is Spiro Agnew. Spiro was super into bribery, especially early in his political career, and then also in the middle of his political career, and then also at the end of his political career. Nixon says, you have to resign. And Spiro says, okay. A little bit after that, Nixon also resigns. Spiro Agnew says, Nixon made me resign. I did nothing wrong. Then Nixon is like, no, well, I did nothing wrong. And then Spiro was like, you made me resign. You made me bribe. And they formed this perfect marriage of ignorance and ego. The last vice president is George Bush Sr.'s vice president, Dan Quayle. The vice president at the time went to a school to talk about learning and education. That's pretty good. Then he had a student write potato on the board, and the vice president, this is a human adult, said potatoes spelled wrong. It needs an E at the end. To his credit, Dan Quayle does have a silent E at the end of his name. There's patterns. There's patterns everywhere. You know what's even worse? No one says anything. Dan Quayle got a ton of flack for it. People were like, he's unfit to be in office. People were super outraged. People poked fun at him. It's so wholesome, right? A single spelling error disqualified someone from office. You know who else knows about vice presidents? My friend, vice president, scholar, and historian, Dr. Andrew Burstein. Hello.
Hey, Esteban, looking good.
We got the live feed. How are you, Andy?
Wait, you're calling my dad? No, don't call
You're always like, that's my dad. Don't go on a road trip with my dad. Don't go to Six Flags with my dad.
Hi, Dad.
Professor Burstein, as long as you're here, would you like to tell us about vice presidential contributions throughout history?
Americans are obsessed with focusing on the firstness of things. One of the most interesting vice presidents we've had was our dear friend Martin Van Buren's vice president, Richard Mentor Johnson. He was deeply in love with a woman named Julia Chin, who was a woman he owned, and brought their daughter to Washington and introduced her to polite society. Richard Mentor Johnson of Kentucky angered a lot of the pro-slavery crowd.
Particular reason you think that Dick Mentor Johnson has not been remembered in the annals of history?
Well, he didn't have a political career after the vice presidency. And that's what happens to a lot of the vice presidents. They disappear. FDR's second vice president, Henry Wallace, he was the Bernie Sanders of the Roosevelt administration. And he was a little bit too radical, too progressive.
We need more deals, more newness.
He wanted a stronger stance on racial equality and gender equality, way ahead of his time. The vice presidency for most of our history has been assigned to men from whom little was expected. So it's a good thing what's been happening now, and especially, just as Joe was put in charge of getting the auto industry back on its feet, or back on its tires. By Goodyear, I think Kamala is going to be given big tasks and is going to be a very visible vice president.
I'm still pro Elizabeth Warren for Prime Minister of America, but O'Biden Kenobi's big selling point is his ability to train the next great rebel leader. Jamala is going to be a dynamic duo, but understandably not the first choice for many progressives. So to discuss how activists can get pumped for moderate incremental change, it's Blair Imani. Blair, author, activist, historian, general badass. How do you feel about Kamala coming on this ticket and being fast-tracked to the next POTUS?
I saw Angela Davis, someone who I greatly admire, a scholar, feminist icon, and she's excited. And I'm always like, well, if Angela Davis is excited, then I have permission to also be excited. But she was also talking about an ability to hold two truths at once. And as a prosecutor, Kamala Harris made some policies that, like most prosecutors across the United States, harmed communities of color, Black folks in particular. What I'm encouraged by is that she has evolved so much in such a short period of time and been so willing to listen to people. And I'll just speak to my own interaction with her. I think I had just graduated high school. I was at a family gumbo party and Kamala Harris rolled through, talked to me about my goals and my ambitions, and she just sat there with me for like an hour. I think if we have somebody in the White House who is willing to sit down and talk to somebody who has no accolades, there's no cameras around, that makes me feel very encouraged.
I've been in enough rooms as the token Asian Jew, and I know you speak out a lot as a queer Muslim for box-checking exercises of diversity for diversity's sake. So what does real representation look like in this sort of situation?
Not so much now, but I found myself in spaces where I was, the token queer Muslim in a space with zero Muslims, where I was in a Christian space or an LGBT space, and they're expecting me to play this one narrative. I'm not going to do a Drake move and say, oh yeah, I started from the bottom. Drake, you're middle class, calm down. It's moving beyond that. Not just saying, hey, look, we have a Black person, but hey, look, we have a diverse administration, we have a diverse cabinet, we have diverse leadership. We're not just going to work on your behalf, but we're going to work with and for you in tandem.
Drake probably should own up to his Degrassi origin story a little bit more. You're a historian. There are compounding problems. It is very hard to try and address any of them. When has incremental change as an approach worked?
I love sci-fi. Bring it to Star Trek really quick. We look at Star Trek and how revolutionary it is, absolutely. But people in that series are still giving painful birth through the birth canal at a time when they can like wave like, you know, a device over you and cure you of all your illnesses, fix your broken bones, teleport you. Okay, well, it's the limitations of that patriarchal construct and our own understandings of human physiology that we're writing sci-fi that limits what the birth process can be like. And that's what really frustrates me with incrementalism, that it doesn't look at the context. We can say, oh, well, redlining is done. People can get equal loans. But then we end up having the coronavirus relief going to a tiny fraction of Black-owned businesses and women-owned businesses. So it's overlaying these truths and saying, hey, we can say never again all we want, but unless we put systems in place, it's going to happen again and again and again.
So if we do have the perfect president, President Picard, who says make it so to bold structural change, how do you make sure that those that actually need it the most in terms of social justice are actually reflected in those policies?
So I think it is worthwhile that we come together and birth that new idea together, because it hasn't existed before. We haven't had the United States that worked for everybody. We simply have not. But it's about sewing that patchwork together into a quilt that keeps everybody warm. It's also really about listening and working with humility, because if we have a leader that feels that they are so arrogant that they're going to save the United States on their own, we've already lost.
So Blair, you're not going to knit America's Snuggie?
My mom will. She's a great knitter. So it's this constant ebb and flow, this progress and then backlash, progress and then backlash. Even if we do have a Biden-Harris presidency, that doesn't mean the work is done.
Great. Well, Blair, thanks so much for coming and being a co-conspirator in this liberal conspiracy that we've started.
The conspiracy is that we're going to get free. That's the whole thing.
Yeah, I'm in. I'm in the gumbo too. Seriously, tell me where and when.
Fabulous.
So maybe you're not as enthused after a virtual convention with this ticket, but truly the most motivating factor is having a nemesis. I recommend everyone find their own personal nemesis. Meet mine. Back in 2016, I was in the administration and supposed to film an interview with a real American that sat next to First Lady Michelle Obama at the State of the Union. And I get to their door, and they won't open it for me. They Googled my name before I arrived and found this man. He is Bizarro Burstein. It's too perfect. Josh Bernstein, pictured here, hosts a hate-filled indie web show in the style of Alex Jones. You could do worse when picking a mentor. You could emulate Jeffrey Dahmer or Pol Pot. Bernstein compares my old teenage boss to Hitler, like, I can't write this shit. So, the chief of staff had to call the woman I was set to film and confirm I was not this guy who looks like he's turned to the dark side after early hair loss. Pro tip, Josh Bernstein, invest in a second camera and a switcher to improve your live stream. But you probably won't, because the main provider's called Black Magic. Remember, folks, I say outrage is a pleasure we don't realize we enjoy. I'm trolling a troll right now, but the most helpful way to create change is counter-programming like this and actually helping people vote, and apparently using stamps. That's the show. We're going to make this every week until we get a new president, and then maybe more, if we feel like it, and you offer us external validation. I need external validation. Thanks for watching.